Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Authorities in New York City are grappling with an unprecedented influx of West African and Latin American migrants. We'll have a report. A vibrant tech ecosystem puts Kenya at the forefront of Africa's digital revolution. And a familiar face and voice joins me in studio with a recap of his sports journey on Sonny Side of Sports as he wraps up his career at the Voice of America. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast with the migrant crisis in New York City, which began nearly 2 years ago with an influx of Venezuelans and other Latin Americans, but now has seen a tripling in the number of migrants from West African nations just in the past 1 year. Aaron Runnan has our report.
In the New York neighborhood of Harlem, a group of West African migrants comes together at a nearby restaurant to relish traditional African dishes. This enclave, known as Little Senegal, warmly receives these newcomers, many of whom have faced arduous journeys in criminal gangs to arrive at this juncture.
I came from Senegal, went to Morocco, to Spain, to El Salvador, to Nicaragua, and from Nicaragua to Mexico. But there was a lot of trafficking. Before entering the bus, they stop you. They had guns. They put a gun on your head, demanding money. And if you don't have money, they will take everything from you. It's very difficult.
Upon arrival in the United States, many encounter harsh living conditions and, quite often, unfulfilled expectations.
Everybody probably think before you come to America, you think this is a place to be. The expectation for these migrants is we're going to America to better our lives, and the sad truth is when they come, it's a whole different story.
These migrants are required to undergo a waiting period of 90 to 150 days before they can be authorized to pursue employment, causing significant uncertainty for many. This recent arrival from Senegal chose not to disclose his name as he seeks a work permit.
We are here to tell you about our problem. We just want to work. We want working permits so we can work, and we will all disperse.
In their pursuit of the American dream, these migrants also find themselves caught up in the political landscape, especially with former President Donald Trump's aggressive stance against migrants who have come to the U.S. illegally.
But most of them have concern about what Trump is saying, especially talking about mass deportation. They're pretty concerned about that. So they're definitely aware of the political situation in the U.S. right now.
State Senator Cordell Clear is a Democrat representing West Harlem in New York City. She holds the view that the migrant issue transcends party lines and more help is needed from federal authorities.
We need to band together and do is make sure states like New York State, who's absorbed so much of this, get some funding from the federal government.
As the election season kicks off and the hurdles confronting these newly arrived migrants capture the media spotlight, what remains steadfast is their aspiration for improved livelihoods, particularly with the backing of the Little Senegal community. Aaron Runnan, VOA News, New York City.
Democratic U.S. President Joe Biden and his Republican challenger Donald Trump have both achieved enough votes to secure their party nominations. VOA senior Washington correspondent Caroline Presutti reports from Florida, Trump's home state, where immigration is a big issue.
You might say Lucy Sophie is a true mother hen, protecting newborn chicks near her store. Here in Key West, harming a chicken or a rooster carries a big fine. The French-American voted Tuesday as a U.S. citizen for the first time. Sophie was energized for former President Donald Trump, like most other Florida Republicans.
How they feel about the country, how they feel about belonging to this country, and you bring that pride to Americans. Maybe I'm not really very excited about his slogan, I will make America great. I wish he just can say, I will make Americans great.
Sophie's town of Key West, Florida has a party vibe. especially along Duval Street, packed with raucous bars and crazy visitors.
In Key West is the southernmost point in the United States. 145 kilometers across the water here is Cuba. Haiti, just a little bit further. So that's why immigration is such a hot political topic here.
Since October, the U.S. Coast Guard has rescued and sent back more than 100 Haitians trying to enter Key West and southern Florida. That compares with more than 300 repatriated Cubans. Tammy Spurlock welcomes them to a point.
I think they're absolutely vital to Key West. They keep our city beautiful. They're what keeps us going. Do I think that everybody needs to come in legally? Absolutely. But they are vital.
Donald Trump, who promises mass deportations if he's reelected, voted Tuesday near his home in Palm Beach, Florida.
They have to close the borders. Our country is dying. Our country is being overridden. This is an invasion.
President Joe Biden was not on the Florida ballot Tuesday. Instead, he was campaigning in the Southwest, where he criticized Trump.
Now he says immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. What the hell is he talking about?
And some of those immigrants, specifically Haitians, are fleeing violence at home. But this first-time voter isn't making exceptions.
I understand that that's an issue, but it's still not an excuse to illegally break the law.
Still, at least one immigrant a day leaves home and braves the dangerous Florida Straits in search of better days ahead. Carolyn Pursuti, VOA News, Key West, Florida.
Rwanda is scheduled to hold its presidential elections in July, and on Saturday, the ruling party Rwanda Patriotic Front endorsed incumbent President Paul Kagame to run for a fourth term. Kagame has been president since the year 2000. Meanwhile, opposition leader Victoire Ingabire was barred by the court from running in the elections. The court cited her previous convictions and what it referred to as her genocidal denial. Joining me is VOA Central Africa reporter Edward Rwema. Eddie, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much for having me, Esther.
Yeah, you know now the preparations for the July presidential elections are in high gear. When do the campaigns start and what are voters expecting?
So the elections will be taking place on July 14th for the people in Rwanda and July 15th for the people who are living outside Rwanda. So that's the Rwandan diaspora. The campaigns are expected to begin on the last week of June. So they will be having probably 20 days to campaign. So far, what we know is that, like you mentioned, President Paul Kagame has been nominated by his political party, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, to be their flag bearer in the coming elections. It's going to be his fourth term. The other people that we know about is Frank, who is also a member of representing the Green Party of Rwanda. You mentioned Victoire Ingabire. She had intentions of running, but because of prior convictions that she has, that bars her from running for office.
Well, 30 years after the 1994 genocide, how are people of Rwanda finding common ground? We know that the celebration, the commemoration is going to be happening next month. Very briefly, tell us about the reconciliation efforts.
Yeah, one would say that Rwanda has made significant progress in the process of unity and reconciliation. You remember in 1994, Rwanda was almost done. But when you look at the achievements, when you look at unity and reconciliation, some of the initiatives that Rwandan government came up with, like Gacaca, whereby genocide convicts or suspects would be tried and before the community people, and then they would either seek for forgiveness, and through that, the country has been able to reconcile its people. The other thing, this April, Rwanda will be commemorating 30 years. So these commemorations are going to be held in different places in Rwanda and outside Rwanda.
Including here in the U.S.
Absolutely, in different embassies.
Thank you so much, Eddie. We'll catch up with that.
Thank you so much.
Get you back on the show.
Appreciate it.
Eddie Rwema is VOA Central Africa reporter. South Africa's top diplomat says U.S. President Joe Biden's support for Israel's assault on Gaza is straining relations between the two nations. VOA's Carol Van Dam has more.
Nalidid Pandor, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, is visiting Washington this week, largely to meet with members of Congress and civil society. At an event on Tuesday at the South African Embassy, VOA asked her about the relationship between the U.S. and South Africa since Pretoria accused Israel of committing genocidal actions in Gaza at the International Court of Justice. In addition, some members of the U.S. Congress are considering a reevaluation of the relationship, in part because of South Africa's close relationships with China and Russia.
I think there's an attempt to take up punitive action against South Africa. You know, this sort of axis of evil notion that is very much part of the political culture.
In March, South Africa requested additional measures from the UN's International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of weaponizing starvation by preventing humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza since the war began in October. Israel's government has denounced the case. The White House told VOA in January that it was meritless. Pandora says she is surprised to find that the U.S. would consider punitive action against her country for speaking out in defense of the Palestinian people.
I believe in freedom. I believe in human rights. I believe in democracy. I believe in equality. I believe in sovereign national interest. I believe in voice for countries. And it was always my understanding that these were principles that were the lifeblood of this great nation. And so to find that the independent position we hold makes me a likely victim of punishment is most surprising to me. I don't know which America this is.
Pandor says on this visit she intends to remind members of Congress of the value of South Africa on its own and as a gateway to the continent. In response to another question from VOA, she says her government thinks any action to diminish the bilateral relationship would be most unwise.
And I believe that the relationship between the United States and South Africa can help to promote peace and democracy on the African continent, and also to support the agenda of development in Africa. Because I can't imagine how initiatives directed at greater trade and development would become operational if institutional capacity of South Africa is not utilized.
South Africa is a major beneficiary of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which offers access to U.S. markets to 32 African nations. Pandor, a veteran member of the ruling African National Congress Party, stresses that Pretoria's problem is not with the White House. She told VOA she was not seeking meetings with either President Joe Biden or Secretary of State Anthony Blinken during her visit. When asked by VOA whether the high-stakes diplomatic pushback has been worth it, Pandor says she drew on lessons from South Africa's history. Carol Van Dam for VOA News, Washington.
Thanks to its vibrant tech ecosystem and young tech-savvy population, Kenya is at the forefront of Africa's digital revolution. The country's internet infrastructure is rapidly evolving into a digital powerhouse, enabling Kenyans to leverage technology for economic growth. VOA technology correspondent Paul Ndiho joins us now with more details. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. Thank you. Kenya has a thriving digital entrepreneurship ecosystem, tech hubs, incubators, innovation spaces to support startups and drive innovation. I spoke to Philip Thigo, a Kenyan technology and public policy expert, to provide more perspective. President William Ruto recently appointed him as a special envoy for technology in Kenya. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much, and it's good to be here.
You were recently appointed Kenya's new special envoy on technology. What does that entail? And congratulations on your end.
Thank you so much. I think it speaks basically to His Excellency the President's vision around how the Global South should lead on emerging technologies. We know Kenya has really been at the vanguard of how technology is adopted for development, and so The vision of the special envoy, in my view, is to look at how the Global South begins to take technology not just as an ICT issue, but potentially as an enabler for development in country, but also as a tool for global diplomacy. We know now that a lot of the issues that we face, whether it's peace, security, climate, have an intrinsic connection with technology. And so I think His Excellency, the President's vision is to see how to elevate an envoy as potentially that interlocutor on how the world begins to understand technology governance.
Kenya has always led when it comes to technology. I'm not surprised that it's the first African country to appoint a special envoy on technology.
If you look at Kenya's vision, we are very clear that we as a country are part of a larger collective. So we have 50 plus countries in Africa, and you cannot develop in isolation. And so Kenya's understanding around how we engage, both for our development, is actually intrinsically connected with our neighbors. And you know, we've been home to a lot of our neighbors when people have been having challenges. And I think it becomes especially our responsibility as one of the stable countries in the region to begin to think beyond ourselves. The second part, of course, is that it's never about the specific issues. It's always about the greater public good. And so if technology is one of the greater assets that Kenya can wield and leverage to ensure that our development reaches everybody, especially those at the bottom of the pyramid, then I think you have a country that is stepping up and is thinking through how do we leverage on our capabilities so that we can work collaboratively.
You are not just a special envoy for Kenya, but you also serve on other international bodies as a technology expert. So for you personally, what does this mean to have these kinds of responsibilities?
It's a big responsibility. If you think about how, for example, Africa is perceived. Every time we talk about technology in Africa, people don't believe that actually we have the capabilities to build world-class technology, whether it's platforms, whether it's software, that can actually help solve global problems. My collaboration with my friends at Shahidi, for example, was very much around how can you use technology to solve crises around elections. And so that is something that people never thought could be possible. And so you see now a technology that was tested, tried in Kenya, is all of a sudden becoming a world-class technology that can be harnessed anywhere else. I mean, at that time, we kept on saying, if it can be built and work in Kenya, honestly, it can work anywhere else. And that's just, it's the reality. Because it can has to be rugged, it has to deal with challenges whether there's no electricity, it has to deal with challenges around access where there's no potentially very low literacy rates. And so I think this becomes a good testing case or use case on how technology can actually solve those problems at scale at a very granular level. And I think the responsibility therefore that I've had a sense that I've had over time is to bring that into the global.
What makes Kenya attractive? Kenya is arguably one of those countries where being able to attract investment when it comes to technology. You have a lot of homegrown technologies that have transcended borders. What makes Kenya what it is?
Kenyans are very innovative. Let's just start from there. The second part, of course, is, and it all boils down to leadership. I think we need to be very, very invested in leadership that is facilitating, especially private sector. The third part, of course, you cannot do any of this without democracy. We've had quite a stable democracy over time. Freedom of press, civil society is able to engage, people are able to critique. You have a very strong judiciary that you can arbitrate cases. We had a very strong use of doing business regime. But also I think the final piece is investments. I think Kenya has been very deliberate. If you look at the current president and his entire manifesto is focused on the digital economy as the anchor enabler. So recognizing that if technology is the anchor enabler, you have to be deliberate on how you invest on this. We were the first country to sort of invest on the fiber cables. We're the first country to have kind of broadband. If you look at how we invest in the telco, first country to zero rate devices. One of the leading countries now to have devices being built here in terms of smartphones. So you can see the thinking around the deliberateness of this.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time, Philip.
Thank you so much for having me.
Philip Thigo is a Kenyan technology and public policy expert and Kenya's special envoy for technology based in Nairobi. Back to you, Esther.
Paul, thanks. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho each Wednesday for his tech report right here on Africa 54. Still to come, a conversation with the often imitated but never duplicated Sonny Young. We'll be right back.
This week on Straight Talk Africa. Soaring food and transportation prices have many Nigerians scrambling to make ends meet. Some multinational companies are now limiting their operations in the West African country. Nigeria's currency has plunged as inflation surges. How did things in Africa's largest economy get so bad? Join me, Heidi Adams, to discuss this on the next Straight Talk Africa.
It is said that firstborn daughters face pressures and often seen as the third parent to their younger siblings. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we hear testimonies as well as experts' take on how firstborn daughters handle the responsibilities of being a caretaker and a house helper in a family, even from a very young age. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Ethiopia's biggest bank is attempting to recover more than $40 million after a technical glitch allowed customers to withdraw more than they had in their accounts. The Commercial Bank of Ethiopia's CEO, Abe Sano, says news of the glitch was spread on social media by university students who withdrew much of the money. An Indian official says the nation is poised to bring in and prosecute 35 Somali pirates its navy captured on a hijacked ship off Somalia. Indian Navy commandos managed to release the Malta-flagged commercial ship MV Rwema last Saturday, which had been hijacked by the Northern Arabian Sea in December. In Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, there are about 800,000 people living in refugee camps near the city of Goma. Medical officials working here say many are suffering from mental health issues. The medical group, Doctors Without Borders, is doing what it can to help. VOA's Zanem Neti Zaid reports.
At Shabindu camp outside Goma, Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF, has set up tents where dozens of displaced persons are being processed. They can also participate in listening sessions with psychologists. Rose has been receiving care for depression. She blames the war for her mental state, but says her journey to recovery has begun.
When someone flees war, they are very disturbed, and that was my case too. But here we have been taught how to forget everything we've left behind and how to calm our thoughts.
Rose is not alone. According to MSF, living in camps around Goma is a challenging environment for the hundreds of thousands of displaced people, especially women. Every day, medical staff say about 70 female survivors of sexual assault visit the 6 MSF health facilities in camps near Goma. Faustin Hakizimana is the head of Bulengo camp. He says the need for psychosocial support is more urgent than ever.
When we looked into the real problem, we found out that many have been disturbed by the horrors of war and others have been raped when they look for wood in the forests, which is why so many women here suffer of mental illness.
Gerlas Mulekia, a clinical psychologist with Médecins Sans Frontières at the Lushagala camp, says more help is needed.
Most of the people we see show signs of anxiety and post-traumatic problems. We run 3 group sessions a day, and each group is made up of 10 people, for a total of 30 people a day. If it goes on like this, we'll need to expand the activities to try and meet as many of the needs as possible.
Psychosocial care is available to both genders, but officials say most of the people taking advantage of the services are women whose mental health challenges are impacting their ability to care for their children. Zanem Neti Zaidi, VOA News, Goma.
VOA's incomparable sports reporter Sonny Young is winding down a long and storied career. He's traveled the world covering sporting events including the Olympics, World Track and Field Championships, the World Cup and the Africa Cup of Nations. And his Sonny Side of Sports radio show remains extremely popular across Africa. Sonny, welcome to Africa 54. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Esther, and sporty greetings.
Sporty greetings to you, Sonny. So let's begin with, your journey in sports. And a lot of people in Africa know you, they hear about you, they're probably surprised you're leaving. Now, tell us about your trips in Africa, what the coverage was like. Give us a bit of the highlights on your coverage of, sports in the continent.
One of my big highlights was my very first trip to Africa back in 2001. I went to Ghana, which is currently hosting the African Games, and I covered a World Cup qualifying match between Ghana and Nigeria, a sellout crowd in Accra. And I also covered a youth charity football match, which was a highlight. But if we go forward to 2010, I traveled to South Africa, which was the first African country to host a FIFA World Cup. And that was a great tournament, my first time in South Africa. And just recently, I should mention, I know you were chatting with Eddie Rwema on the show earlier. I traveled to Rwanda with Eddie in 2022 for Basketball Africa League coverage. And that was a big highlight. Eddie was a wonderful guide.
Tell us about some of the favorite interviews that you did while on the continent.
Well, 2018, I was back in South Africa for the NBA Africa game in Johannesburg. And two of the big giants in basketball were there, Dikembe Mutombo from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The short interview I did with Kareem, I don't think I've ever held a microphone higher, Esther, trying to get his comments. But that was definitely one of my favorite interviews with Kareem. And there have been others that just really leave me with good feelings.
I'm going to ask you twin questions here because of time. What about your interactions with listeners and viewers? How has that been? And also tell us your most memorable moment right here at the Voice of America.
One of my favorite interactions with listeners, I was visiting a VOA affiliate station in Nigeria, and this young staffer at the station, he had my voice down perfectly. He did a perfect impersonation, which was kind of odd, but he was spot on. And here at VOA, one of my great moments was when Smokin' Joe Frazier, the former world heavyweight champion, came to VOA. This was about 20 years ago, and I had a chance to interview him. He was one of my boyhood heroes, so that was a great moment.
Sonny, kick that ball. Sonny Young, thank you so much. The energy, we're going to miss you a lot. Sonny Young. Yes, VOA sports reporter Sonny Young with me right here in studio, and that's our show for today. You can watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching. So now you pick that up.